Good afternoon, everyone. I'd love to have one of those ones. I think that'll be incredible, especially with the heat we're experiencing today. So please relax, take your jackets off and just unwind and take it easy this afternoon. But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and that we pay respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of ongoing importance for the Kaurna people living today. I'd like to acknowledge our special guests, His Excellency the Honourable Hugh Van Lay, Governor of South Australia, and Mrs Van Lay, the Honourable Russell Wheatley, MLC, President of the Legislative Council, representing the Premier, Jay Weatherill, MP, Senator the Honourable Simon Birmingham, Minister for Education and Training, Rachel Sanderson, MP, Member for Adelaide, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Stephen Marshall, MP, Vicky Chapman, MP, Deputy Opposition Leader, the Honourable Jing Lee, Member for the Legislative Council, the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Mr Martin Hazy, and the Lady Mayoress of Adelaide, Miss Genevieve Tessera Hazy. Mayors and councillors from a number of councils across South Australia, Paul Vasilieff, our very own South Australian and National Young Australian of the Year for 2017 and our guest speaker for today, South Australia's Australian of the Year recipients for 2018, Professor David AC, Barbara Spriggs, Kyron Dixon and Andrew Cozzi Costello. Both David and Andrew Cozzi that were not available today to attend because of a prior arrangement, and they sent their apologies. Australia Day ambassadors and corporate club members, board members of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, and a special thank you to Emma Chidlow, our Interim Executive Officer, who has worked tirelessly with her team and is responsible for the delivery of the 2018 events for this year. Thank you, Emma and the team. And obviously a very warm welcome to our new incoming CEO, Jan Shawley. The board and the team really looks forward to working with you, Jan, over the next few years. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here for the 2018 Australia Day Lunch. Events like this obviously would not be possible without the support of all of our sponsors, Cooper's Brewery, Serafino Wines, Novatech Creative Events Technology, Argon Design, Channel 9 and Kyton's Bakery. Also, I'd like to acknowledge a number of other sponsors and stakeholders of Australia Day Council who are here with us today. Oz Diamond Mining, the major sponsor for the Australia Day fireworks, Buildtech, Careerdis Corporation, Maris Group, Norm Metals, Sealy International, All Transport Group, Luca Group, Strathmore Building Group, Alfred James and Sons and Romeo's Foodland. And I'd also like to welcome our new corporate members, Hunter Careers, Des's Minibus and Algomas. You are all very valuable to us and to the events and programs we conduct, and on behalf of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, I sincerely thank you. Another year and another Australia Day. And as we heard before, on Australia Day, we recognise the contributions of all Australians, from our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have been here for more than 65,000 years, to those who have lived here for generations, and those who have come from all corners of the globe and all walks of life to call Australia home. Today, I want to draw a very clear distinction on four main issues as I see them: the date, the day, the debate, and the future. The 26th of January date commemorates the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788, and when Commander Captain Arthur Phillip landed at Sydney Cove, raising the Union Jack, proclaiming sovereignty over part of the continent, that landing was known as Foundation Day, and it was also referred to as the First Landing Day. It could never be denied that over a century that followed was one of oppression and genocide, where massacres and atrocities were committed against the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. In May of 1967, 179 years since the first landing, our First Nations peoples were overwhelmingly recognised in an Australian referendum, 180 years almost. With everything that our short history tells us, let's not kid ourselves. That date does mark the beginning of colonisation. 1788 marks a date of invasion and survival for our Aboriginal people. But do we really think a mere date change will undo over 2 centuries of significant events and wrongdoings? We cannot change our past, but there is a lesson with every historic event that should help us better understand each other as humans. In all honesty, most of us sitting here today, or even in Australia, will not have much in common with Captain Phillip. I would struggle to think that any of us actually celebrate that date to mark the beginning of colonisation. Which brings me to my next point. So what are we celebrating on the day? I want to share with you some key statistics as part of the research commissioned by the National Australia Day Council of Australia. 4 in 5 Australians see the day as being more meaningful than just a day off. 13 million Australians participate in Australia Day celebrations each year. 16,000 new Australians become citizens on Australia Day. 75% of Australians believe the day should be a time to recognise and celebrate the country's cultural diversity. 54% give thought to how lucky we are to live in Australia, and currently almost half of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are actively engaged on Australia Day. What we acknowledge on Australia Day is not Captain Cook or colonisation. What we truly celebrate is how far we have come as a nation, how our diversity became our strength, how our past journeys have inspired our present and shaped our future. We celebrate unity in a world torn by division. We celebrate our democracy, our freedom of opinion, our power to debate, to agree and to disagree, and we celebrate a fair go. But what most of us don't do on Australia Day, and what we need to consider doing more of, is acknowledge, respect, appreciate, embrace, connect with, and cherish our First Nations people and their history. Australia Day is an opportunity to acknowledge and learn about our nation's past. It's a time to reflect on and learn about our national journey, including our ongoing history, traditions, and cultures as a society, and also those of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. But the day doesn't have to hold the same meaning for all of us. Why should it? Take a bus one day, and you will sit next to someone who has lived here for 2 generations that tells you the story of how they've escaped a war-torn country for a better life. You'll sit next to an Indigenous person. You will even sit next to a student that's arrived here in Australia for a better quality of life. You possibly even sit next to someone that their families have been here for way too many generations that they couldn't even possibly remember. Or someone that's just simply attending an interview after fleeing to Australia from them being a refugee. We are all free people, and we do not think or feel the same. And that is what makes Australia beautiful, as we are a mosaic of broken pieces better for coming together. We each have our own history, which influences the way we feel on Australia Day, from a feeling of mourning and loss to one of freedom. Which brings me to my next point. So what are we debating? Change the date, or don't. I almost want to see a show of hands in the room, but does it really matter? Are we missing the point here? Because if you do or don't support a change in the day itself should never change. At the Australia Day Council, we are committed to celebrating Australia Day, whichever date it is. As a matter of fact, we celebrate Australia Day, not the date. I'm sure we'll be happy to celebrate Australia Day once a month if the feds were to give us a public holiday. Maybe Senator Birmingham can give us a hand with that. But yes, any date change will remain a matter for the federal government to consider. But the debate itself remains one for the community to have. And in this country, the Australian people will always be heard. Our democracy, our freedom of speech, and our ability to have this debate in the first place is exactly what we're celebrating on Australia Day. The Australia Day debate requires broad community education, compassion and sincerity. It should not be used as a political tool. Australia Day isn't for the right or the left of politics. It is for all of Australians to reflect, debate and celebrate. The Australia Day Council of South Australia is committed to reconciliation and inclusiveness. We welcome the debate and discussion about our national identity that will strengthen our resolve as a nation for all our people. So let us fast forward to the future. I am certain at some stage we may become a republic. We will even have a new national day. With that in mind, all we need to think about in the meantime is, did we do enough to learn, to preserve, to respect and appreciate our history in full? Or did we just miss that opportunity? Reconciliation doesn't start by changing history. It starts with empathy and education. Other countries that have embraced their history have elected to educate their children about the past. We would go to length in protecting heritage buildings that are less than 50 years old. But we fall short in preserving the living culture of our First Nations people that transcends our existence by well over 65,000 years. In different groups trying to hijack the debate on the date, let us not lose the true meaning of Australia Day in the process. This is a very important conversation for our nation, and not only because of its relevance to our Aboriginal people and others, but because it will shape our future for generations to come. The Australia Day Council of South Australia will continue to aspire to an Australia Day that is increasingly inclusive and has the appropriate recognition that highlights the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to our communities, and that they are the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and waterways and their centrality to the great Australian story. And on this Australia Day, we will commence first thing in the morning by acknowledging our First Nations people with a smoking ceremony at Elder Park. This will enable all of us to reflect on the past, acknowledge our common history, and recognise the date that has a lasting impact on our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people over the years. During the day, we will welcome our new Australians at the many citizenship ceremonies held around the country. And we end the day proudly celebrating as one what we have become as a nation. So let us on this Australia Day reflect on the many events that have shaped our history as we debate and celebrate our present and aspire to a better future. And as we look forward, we must all unite for the betterment of all Australians. Thank you.